I love you, Pumpkin.
I love you, honey bunny.
Everybody be cool, this is a robbery!
Any of you fucking pricks move! And I'll execute every motherfucking last one of you!
That's right, everybody. The movie I'm going to be reviewing for my Rough Cuts edition is, of course, Pulp Fiction. Hey YouTube, Fullz90 here. So, I've already said I'm going to talk about Pulp Fiction, but what is Pulp Fiction? Pulp Fiction is the 1994 Quentin Tarantino gangsterland film. Quentin Tarantino stars in this movie alongside a whole host of other Hollywood actors, including the likes of John Travolta, Samuel L. Jackson, Uma Thurman, Eric Stoltz, Christopher Walken, Bruce Willis, just to name a few. Let's take a quick second to look at the plot. What is the plot? Well, the plot follows a crime lord called Marcellus Wallace and the different characters that interact with him throughout his days. So, on one side you've got two characters, Vincent and Jules, played by John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson, who play two of his hitmen. You've got Uma Thurman, Mia, who plays his wife, and Bruce Willis, who plays a boxer who is looking to throw a match for Marcellus Wallace, obviously for cash. So I just have to say right off the bat that I love this movie. I have to say it's one of my favourite movies of all time. A highly recommended movie. It's one you've got to see, but I'm going to tell you why. Let's begin with the acting in this movie. I have to say, big names are big names for a reason. Almost all the performances are just perfect and very, very cool and edgy performances by the whole cast, and everyone plays a great role. The movie direction is just fantastic. Quentin Tarantino does an excellent job. He's got lots of panning, sweeping shots and lots of fixed camera frames when it has to be, and I have to say the key word in this movie and the key word for the direction and the style of this movie is just 90s cool. All the sets are perfect, all the camera shots are perfect, all the music's perfect, and just this movie oozes cool just to an infinite degree. The script in this movie is just fantastic. I have to say it's probably one of my favourite scripts of all time. And first thing to note is it's a Quentin Tarantino movie, so we're not talking point A to point B timeline. It jumps, it skips, and creates this interweaving tapestry of different scenes and parts of the movie that by the end of the movie, in fact, you've come full circle. You've got the opening scene, and by the end, you're in the opening scene, and that's so clever. And it does it in such a way that it doesn't feel cheated, you know. You don't feel cheated when you go back in time. You just think, oh, I wonder what happened, let's find out. It really does add to the movie. The second point I wanted to make is the script itself is just the ideas in it are just brilliant. A main focus in the movie is this idea of conversation, and a lot of the times in movies when scriptwriters try conversation, it can come out very boring. But what Quentin Tarantino does in this movie is he manages to create a script that uses conversation in such a efficient way, in the sense that the conversation is not only interesting but a great way of introducing characters as well as revealing characters' descriptions. And I mean, the classic scene is the scene in where Samuel L. Jackson is talking to John Travolta about the McDonald's meals and what they're called in Europe versus America. And in general, that seems like a pretty boring concept for a conversation, certainly in a movie. But just the way it's played out and the way it's shot and the way the actors deliver it, it just is so interesting and just tells us, it reveals so much about the characters. Another key thing I wanted to talk about, a theme in this movie, is this idea of redemption. Now, if you've seen the movie, you might know what I'm talking about, but a lot of the movie is about characters. It's not just a straightforward gangster film, it's a lot deeper, and it's a lot about characters finding redemption. On one side, you've got Samuel L. Jackson's character. I'm not going to tell you a whole lot, because I do not want to spoil it if you have not seen it, but you've got this idea of the Samuel L. Jackson character finding that this thing happens in the beginning, or certainly the beginning of the movie, but it's shown in the middle, if you know what I'm talking about. And it's just sort of his idea of his redemption, and about Bruce Willis's character, about the idea of his redemption. He's an old boxer, and he hasn't got much fights left in him, and it's about him sort of giving up, this idea of him sort of getting paid to fail, and it's that sort of redemption of Bruce Willis's character. Another thing which makes this movie particularly interesting is the way in which Quentin Tarantino's script works in such a way that he'll put you in a familiar scene. He'll put you in a scene and you'll think, okay, this is going to pan out, I know roughly what's going to happen here, and then suddenly just bam, he'll switch on its head, and just the pacing in this movie is brilliant. I mean, you're watching a scene and you're leaning back thinking, this is quite slow, interesting, fair enough, and then bam, it's 90 miles an hour, something happens almost in an instant. A final point I just wanted to make about all Quentin Tarantino movies. And I think the reason I love them so much, Quentin Tarantino's got this great way of taking an old type of movie. I mean, if you look at all his movies, he's done war movies, he's done gangster movies, Pulp Fiction, he's done black exploitation movies, and he takes all those genres and he looks at them and he sort of puts his own Quentin Tarantino spin on it. And it's familiar in the sense you can sort of relate to them. You've seen other gangster movies, you've seen Godfather, so you know the kind of idea. But he does it in such a way that it's very, very Quentin Tarantino. And even if you didn't know who the director was and you're aware of Quentin Tarantino, you could almost even just predict, you know who directed this movie just by, he's got a very, very familiar style, which I love. I have to say I love all his movies. Except Grindhouse, which was shit. So finally, I just wanted to talk about maybe some bad points in the movie. This movie hasn't got a whole lot, so I'm just going to start briefly. The first thing is, it's a very violent movie, so while it's not always a bad point, if you're squeamish or you don't like violent movies, this is not the movie for you. Give it a skip. The second point I wanted to make is, I think the scene with Uma Thurman and John Travolta in the diner, I think it's a little slow, but that's just a personal opinion of mine. And if you watch the movie, you'll have your own judgment, and if you're going to watch the movie, look at it and see if you agree with me. If not, that's fine, of course. The third point I wanted to make is, it doesn't have a massive amount of rewatch value. Don't get me wrong, I've seen it more than once and I loved it more than once. But because I mentioned the scenes very quickly change and increase speed and decrease speed very quickly, then it sort of takes away if you've seen it before, because it kind of like, there's no surprise element. And of course, that happens with every movie, and it's not really a criticism at all. So drawing to conclusion, all I've got to say is this is a 2 thumbs up movie. If you have not seen it, go and see it. If you've seen it, go and see it again. If you've seen it 5 times, go and see it again, because it is a great movie, and it's certainly one of my top 10 films, maybe top 5, and it's definitely an iconic film of the 90s. You've got to check it out, and you've got to see it. Go and see it. Thanks very much for watching. I'm Fullz90. Comment and rate, please. Give lots of comments, because this is my first review, so I want to hear what you think, and I want your opinions on how to make them better. So please do that. And thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you later.